welcome to another episode of Hello the Podcast. I am your host, Jayla, and we have a lovely guest today. This is Kési, author of The Morning Always Comes, Reflections on Being and Becoming, and advocate for Better to Speak and founder of Better to Speak. So we're so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, great. So tell us a little bit about you. Obviously, you have a lot going on.
Yeah. So basically, like you said, I'm the founder of Better to Speak, which is a media platform for young Black storytellers and change makers. I'm a self-published author. I published The Morning Always Comes last year. Essentially, it's an essay collection about my identity as a young Black woman from the South. So yeah, Better to Speak book. Work in marketing for nonprofits and political candidates. That's pretty much it.
Nice. So, on the topic of politics,
Yeah.
we are here. You guys will be watching this later this month, but the election happened this week for us. So, tell me your thoughts. Tell me what that meant to you and what is kind of happening in your mind and in your world.
Yeah. So like I said, my day job essentially is the marketing team for an agency that does marketing and fundraising. I believe we did some stuff for the Harris campaign, but also some other down ballot races. So I think for me, it was cool to just know that I'm a part of an organization that has touched a lot of these races.
Yeah.
Of course, with the outcome of it, it was obviously very disappointing, and I think scary on a personal level, and I think on a professional level, it's you put your all into these kinds of things,
absolutely.
and then when they don't turn out the way that you want to or work for, of course it's disappointing. But I think aside from that, it was good to that specific night, just be with my coworkers and be a part of that moment. So yeah, I think it's just the days after, just kind of reflecting and thinking about what this means in terms of the work that I do in the spaces that I'm in, the spaces that I'm able to have influence in, but also again just on a personal level, what does that mean for the next 4 years and beyond of my life.
So did you know growing up that you would always want to be a part of something bigger or be in the world of news and politics and journalism?
Yeah, so I always grew up knowing that I was a writer, and then my mom worked in news, so I always grew up, she would take me to work with her sometimes, so I grew up literally in that environment. So I think it felt like a natural next step once I was choosing majors for college and everything. And so once I did get there, I think obviously first in the world of news, and then from there I kind of thought that I would just be a political reporter, and then kind of seeing how that went and worked, I think I just wanted a deeper level of involvement and engagement. And so I discovered not just working for and with campaigns, but the world of political communications, and kind of transferring the same skill set over to just being in the issue and being with candidates and causes that align with what I really believed in.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to the subject of voting, can you talk about the importance of voting? This year we had a lot of people who disagreed with voting, which I can totally understand. However, conversations I've had in my own community have been, that to be a revolutionary, you have to also vote. So, can you tell me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely of the school of thought. Growing up in the Atlanta area, I was always inspired by the civil rights movement. I think that's the root of when I think about what it means to be Black and politically engaged, that's the root and core of it for me. So I'm never going to be the person that's oh, don't vote, or it's not worth it. All right, ancestors fought for the right to vote. I'm one of the, that's my school that I think coming into it. And so I think voting is kind of, not the bare minimum, but the entry point, I think, for civic engagement. And beyond that, I try to think of, when I'm waking up every day and involved with my community, how am I engaged in some way? And so I think it's important to vote and to be an informed and educated voter. And I also think that, there are people for whom voting, just as we see, make it a point to vote and then it doesn't turn out the way that you maybe hope. Or I think for some communities you feel the impact of when the election goes a certain way. So I think voting is important. I think that other forms of civic engagement are important, whether that's protesting or like I said, I'm not the person that's going to say don't vote, but I understand when people say the electoral system doesn't work for everyone. But yeah, I think it's important, but I think I'm kind of toeing that line of it's important, but I see why people say that electoral politics is not going to be what frees us.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's the combination of the two.
Yeah.
It's like, obviously our ancestors fought for the right to vote, and it's our right. And also, like, it takes more than that.
Yeah.
Every time it's kind of a fight, whether whoever side wins, or whoever wins, period. So, yeah, I totally agree with that sentiment. So, for our topic today, we discuss talking about unlearning, but also defining Black womanhood, especially in their 20s. Just a tidbit, Kési and I grew up together. So, we went to middle school and then also high school, and then we went to Howard and I went to Georgia State. So, but we've kept in touch, thank God for social media.
Right.
So, yeah, tell me what your experience has been, from childhood to womanhood. I know for me, it's been a wild ride. So I would love to hear more about, how even growing up in the same environment, things are different.
Yeah.
So for everyone. So tell me a little bit about you.
I think going off what I was just talking about, like I grew up in a family that was very like engaged. I think just growing up I saw like beyond career and like ambition and things like that, like being involved in your community. So I grew up with a lot of those things at the top of mind. And I think growing up in like Kennesaw, Acworth, Cobb County, I didn't really see like obviously like Black people that were involved in that way. And so I think I'm glad that I had the family that I did to kind of balance that out. And then getting to Howard, it was kind of like this enlightenment period for me where I think I was really able to find myself and be around people that look like me, believe the same things that I did, or even that didn't, or just kind of have my worldview like stretched and expanded in different ways. And I think that's followed me as I've been back home the past couple of years. Like now I live like in Atlanta proper, but sort of like being connected to the community and just like the importance of that. I don't know, I feel like that's really broad, but yeah, just the importance of being connected to community. Has followed me essentially just throughout my life. I think that's
Gotcha. So, from going to somewhere like at Acworth, Kennesaw, Cobb County, to Howard University, like what was that like for you? You obviously had a strong home connection and you knew who you were, essentially. But what was that like? Seeing it in a different light. Going to the HBCU, seeing more people like you. Being in DC.
Mm-hmm.
So. What was that like?
Yeah, I think it was important to both my parents went to Howard and a lot of my family went to HBCU, so I think that was always like in the back of my mind. Mm-hmm. I think when I was actually there, I think the summer before classes, freshman year actually started, I was there for orientation and then went to my first protest. I think that was around the time that Philando Castile was killed. Mm-hmm. And so I think just being in DC, it's obviously a very civically engaged city. And so there are plenty of opportunities to be engaged. I think DC really taught me the importance of really being in cities and listening to people on the ground who are there. I know people talk a lot about Howard students versus DC locals. I see a lot of that in Atlanta, just people that are transplants in different cities versus really being connected to the quote unquote local community, things like that. So I think DC just kind of exposed me to just the broader world as a whole. I think again, really being from a small town.
Yeah.
I think also was that transition kind of made it a culture shock. Yeah, I think it just kind of just expanded on what I already knew kind of existed in the world, and just gave me the opportunity to start to define how I saw myself in that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. With you finding your own footing and everything, would you say now as a 26-year-old that you really know who you are?
I feel at 26, I feel more settled into who I am. I think that, and the election is a really good point about this too. I think I was a lot more engaged and involved. I think I made a post on my story the other day about this year, especially post book, I was I don't want to be involved as directly as I normally am. And that kind of felt like a big identity shift for me. And like, oh, I'm not the person that's like, you know, out there knocking doors and, you know, working for a campaign and things like that, where it's just, I'm just doing my job, my day job, and working on other small projects at the moment, and just like keeping and pushing from there. So I think just like giving myself the space at 26 to just kind of like be open to the idea of, you know, being or exploring different aspects of myself.
Yeah.
I think it's like you said, in your 20s, that's kind of the time where you're supposed to do that more. Just like, I don't know, energetically, enthusiastically, and just be open to different aspects of yourself. I think like my mindset so early on, like I said, like family and community has been like a big thing for me. And so I think that like the responsibility of that has always been at the forefront of my mind. And so I think just like reshifting that and saying like, what do I need and how can I just like enjoy my life and just center my peace and things like that. Because I think like I said, the responsibility, especially when it is so socially minded, I think was a lot and definitely pushed me more to like burnout and things like that really early on. And I still value those qualities and I still think they're important, but I think at 26 I'm still learning how to like center myself in that and make sure that I'm good first before I'm pouring into everything and everyone else.
Yeah. With we still have a few years left in our 20s.
Yeah.
But with us transitioning, do you know what you want to do next, or you know what you have in mind for Better to Speak, or just your life?
Yeah, so Better to Speak is actually sunsetting-ish in a way. With this iteration of it, I think, to your point, like being in the journalism space, I think just even seeing like the post-election content, like people analyze stuff into the ground. And I think in journalism specifically, it can be encouraged with like the 24-hour news cycle, and everyone wants to have the best insights and analysis of everything. And I think it just like working in that space is not conducive to like the life I'm trying to have for myself.
Yeah.
Because again, it forces you to constantly be like aware of every single thing and thinking about every single thing. And I think being aware and informed is important, but it's just like not like the most healthy. And so I think just like being able to have that work-life balance as I'm moving, you know, closer to 30 in my 30s is important to me. And so with that, I think like BTS is kind of sunsetting, and I'm just thinking about a lot of those things as well. And thinking about like if I were to bring that back or return to like having my own media platform in a way, like what is the kind of media platform I want to build? Because I've learned so much, but I think that was kind of like a big thing where I don't want to spend my 20s and beyond just like constantly, especially being a founder of something, like being in that world is like completely different, where I just realized I just want to write and create. And so with that, I find myself being really like interested in just like the art museum space, and I'm actually working on an event for The Morning Always Comes early next year to kind of bring, so basically when I rolled it out, I did a photo series to kind of illustrate some of the concepts in the book. And so I'm working with the photographer that did it, Daniela Almona, who took the photos to print them and have them like on display for a weekend. So things like that, where I just like want to just create different opportunities to engage with different stories and concepts like that, again related to Black womanhood and identity. So just things like that, just keep creating in different forms will always kind of be my thing.
So here on Hello, obviously we talk a lot about intersectionality, and obviously as a Black woman, that's an intersection in itself. That's two fights that we're fighting. As opposed to like a white woman, you're just fighting to be a woman, you know, you're fighting to have your rights as a woman, versus, you know, as a Black woman, you fight to have rights as a Black person and as a woman. And then if you're of any, you know, sexuality besides straight, you fight for those rights as well. So what are your thoughts on intersectionality, and kind of define your definition of intersectionality?
Yeah, I think one thing that's been top of mind for me, of course, like you just said, like being Black, a woman, like the queer community. I think in my book I touch a lot about like being a Black woman, but also young, and like how that's defined a lot of my worldview. And as I get older, like of course that's something you age out of. But I've also been thinking just a lot about like how you can have some identities that are marginalized and some that aren't. And I think like especially thinking about the election results and what that means, like there's a moment of pause that I have to have, where it's like you have some privileges that, you know, you're, American, like some people are not, right? Things like that, where you have to be just like mindful of like where you, like privileges still, even in your marginalization, and just keeping all those things in mind. So yeah, I think that's kind of like where I'm at too. Just like it's not only the ways in which you can be marginalized. It's like how can you still be available for communities who are even like more on the margins, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. When I came up with the idea for this podcast, I feel like even in college, like learning about the diaspora and things like that, intersectionality was always something that like really, really spoke to me, because I was like, people don't understand you can fight, especially I feel like in the Black community, we feel like we can't fight more than one fight, and in doing that, we lose the one fight, because it feels like, we don't know how to fight all Black. We don't know how to fight for everybody Black. It's like, I'm rooting for you, but not if you're gay. I'm rooting for you, but not if you're a woman. So I'm like, well, we can't all be free until we're all free. A lot of conversations since the election have been just kind of rooted in frustration. Because I feel like, why do you have to be a part of the community to have empathy for a community? Even before I came out, I was always feeling like, I've understood, like, wanting to be accepted as a gay person and wanting to be accepted as anybody different, just because, they teach us growing up, treat people how you want to be treated, and then we become adults, so that is, like, totally forgotten. So, obviously, it's a lot of taught hate. Families teach kids to be hateful, their community might teach them to be hateful and things like that. So that's, an interesting point of the privilege of that type of community, but also, is empathy a privilege, do you think? Do you think that's a privilege to be born with that trait or to acquire that trait?
Yeah, I feel like there's a point that I make about empathy in my book where it's like, I think when people view it as like, oh, I have to imagine what life is like in this other person's shoes. And I'm like, no, you don't, because I think that, there are some, like I was just talking about privilege, is like, you just won't ever understand what that person's experience is like. But you ought to be able to just say, like, I don't know what your experience is like, but I believe you when you say, certain aspects of my lived experience are difficult, or the way that people like look at me, regard me, treat me is harmful, and say I believe that, right? And I think as far as empathy being like, I don't know, I think one thing in particular that I've been thinking about, like with the trans community, for example, and I remember watching a documentary that said like only a certain percentage of people have actually like met a trans person in their life. And I just remember like, I think back to my own experiences, or like a summer camp that I went to as a kid, and we like sat in a circle and like everyone went around and said their pronouns. Like dapping normalized for me at a very young age. And like it was kind of like, okay, like there are people with different experiences, move on. And so I think when people like aren't able to have that empathy, it's like, oh, like your worldview is so like limited to where you really like can't imagine other people's experiences.
In your outreach and the work you do and everything like that, what advice would you have to other femme Black individuals, maybe growing up in a small town, or having an experience that is the Black experience? What advice would you have in finding yourself and outreach, if that's something they're interested in, and just kind of all of your areas of expertise? If they like to write, if they're writers, if they like to be an author, what advice would you have in getting their words out?
I think it's kind of twofold. I think that I've touched on like kind of moving out of this era of my life where I was like doing a whole lot of stuff, and I would say that if you have these ideas or different passions or things that you're that excite you and that energize you to pursue those things, I think one thing I'm very proud of myself for, like even like my book being a product of that, is just kind of going after the ideas and seeing them through. So that you're able to kind of learn, and now, like even if I'm not doing all the same things I was doing even a few years ago, like I have this portfolio and like that I, work to kind of build for myself, whether that be in like writing or better to speak or just being involved in different like initiatives or organizations and things like that. But then on the other hand, as I'm learning now and trying to be more intentional about now is like carving out that space for myself and prioritizing self-care, just in terms of like literal like physical rest, mental rest, things like that. Giving myself the space to feel my feelings, and if you feel like, okay, feel your feelings, then get back to the work that you're doing, to do that as well, because I think sometimes there's this trope among Black women that like we feel this responsibility to everyone else and not ourselves, and I think that it's, like I have mentioned, like it's important to kind of not completely abandon everyone else, like if that's like what you need, then sure, but I think one thing that I heard one time was like put yourself first, just in terms of like chronology or hierarchy, and not like put yourself first and like everybody else. It's like center yourself so that you have something to give to other people, because I think like I had mentioned before, I was kind of very much so headed towards burnout at a very young age, and just I knew that my life wasn't going to pan out like that. And so I'm definitely finding like a better relationship to my work and to my community or other people in my life. It's not rooted in like, I'm doing all of this, and I think sometimes as Black women, like we keep so much of that in and like don't ever put it anywhere, and so I think that can lead to resentment and burning out and things like that. So yeah, twofold of just like center yourself, but also don't feel afraid to do that or to pursue the things that are important to you.
What motivates you to do the work that you do? I know you talked about your mom, it's just your family. That's just kind of the environment you grew up in, and it kind of just felt natural to you. But even now, like, what motivates you to stay in that space?
Yeah, I think right now, seeing like, I don't want to sound like an old head, but like seeing like younger, like people who are like, younger than me, who are still energized and like, wanting to contribute to the world and make the world a better place and things like that, I think is still inspiring, because I think like I am getting to that age where I think adulthood is kind of starting to set in, and the jadedness of adulthood is starting to set in.
The rose-colored glasses are off.
Yeah. So I think it's
especially in a moment like this.
Right. And it's like I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think seeing that energy in like younger people is really inspiring. I think seeing other people who have been doing the work. I think one benefit of like making it a point to be in certain like community spaces and being around other people that do the work is, even if like you need to take a break from certain things, like other people still continue, and it doesn't have to, like, just because you need to take a step back doesn't mean the work stops. And so I think seeing the work continue, or people who are still like, okay, how do we, what's the next step after this, and how do we kind of organize people and mobilize people, I think it's still inspiring. So yeah, I think just being around people that, even if you need to take a step back, or even if other people need to take a step back, just like knowing that it's okay.
Yeah.
So you're able to get what you need and continue, instead of just going until you can.
Yeah. All right, so thank you so much for coming today. I'm so glad that we had this conversation. So now we're just going to go into our segments. First, we're going to start with Jayla's Gems. Jayla's Gems is a segment we do here where we talk about things we have just loved in the past month, year, however long, week. Something that's just good on your heart, and it can be anything: music, TV, media, anything. Principal.
I think for me, top of mind, I would say is the Wicked movie coming up. I feel like I've been like so immersed in that universe. I wasn't a theater kid. I was a band kid growing up, but got introduced to the theater world, and Wicked specifically, like through Ariana Grande. And so I'm really excited for that movie. I would also say Doechii, her mixtape, I think it is. Just seeing that she's now Grammy nominated off that project. I see her this coming week, so I'm excited for that.
That's gonna be a really good show. Cool, Wicked. The thing about Ariana Grande, when I think Broadway, I always think of 13, when she was literally this like young thing. She had her regular hair before she was Kat or Victoria. So she's people that are like, oh, she's a pop star, and I'm like, you don't know how she started. You don't know. So I totally get that. I'm not nearly as big big of a fan as I once was, but when people are like that, I'm like, you have no idea. Like, she is truly Broadway kid all the way. Like, her whole family and everything. For me, I would say my jam right now. Ooh, I don't know what to think. Let's see. I'm trying to say something different because it seems like every episode I say Megan Thee Stallion.
Mm-hmm.
I just love her so much.
Yeah.
And then obviously her documentary just came out, which was really, really rough for me.
Yeah.
Rough that she had to go through all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm trying to think of something different. I'm gonna say my jam right now. I'm gonna shout out. He's here right now, Jordan. Here at the podcast, we have an editor now, and it's so helpful to me, and it's changing my life. So we're back on track. So yes, thank you, Jordan. We'll give you a little clap. So yeah. So our next segment is called "Don't Piss Me Off." Don't piss me off. And it's the opposite of Jello Jams, basically. You just tell us a pet peeve or something that has just really irked you. We talked a lot about that in this episode.
Yeah.
But if you have a specific one, please share.
I think what is coming up for me, I've been really like Black happy recently. I feel like just with so many different things, like I said on Twitter specifically, I'm just like, I'm seeing a dumb opinion, I'm like, I always see that.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I think I used to feel like bad about sometimes like blocking, I think random people is whatever, but just like, or wanting to just be open to different opinions, things like that. And I'm just like, honestly, I don't want to see it.
I don't want to see it.
I want to see it next.
I'm done.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I kind of have that like guilt as well too, especially like with people I grew up with. I was like, oh, well, I don't want them to feel like that. It's like, well, what about what I feel like?
Right.
So yeah, I can agree with that totally. Definitely your 20s are for that, to really figure out who you are. I am in a place right now where I'm just kind of purging. You guys have missed it. This is actually, I didn't even mention, this is our first episode back. So thank you so much. We had one 2 weeks ago with, this is going to air later this month, like I said, but we had one literally on election night come out, but that one was recorded all the way back in August, and that was really rough for me, trying to edit that. The universe was like, girl, stop. So that's why I'm so happy we have Jordan now. But this is our first episode back, and we're going to be consistent. It's going to be great. So with that, since then, I have really been in a purging stage. I got married. Over that time, I got rid of some friends that I'm no longer friends with. I ended some toxic relationships. I left my toxic workplace. So I'm just really in a butterfly. This is my solution. I'm in a butterfly stage. So I guess that's kind of like what pissed me off, is because you will get removed from my life. You will be done. That'll just be it. So yeah, but I'm glad to. I have been, for definitely at least for this year, really just saying like, I want community. I want, good friends, and I want, to have these kind of roots. I've read The Spirit of Intimacy by Simone Fusome, and that was my 3rd time reading it this year. But it just really, really stresses the importance of community and, your tribe and things like that. So I feel like the universe was like, oh, you for real, girl? You really want, your life to be like that? Okay, cool. So, lose to gain. So that's kind of where we're at now. So, but thank you so much. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And tell us where we can find you.
At Kési Felton on everything. My website is down right now, but it should be back up in a few months, question mark. So Kési Felton is my website. Better to Speak is better to speak _ and bettertospeak.org. Yeah,
all right. Is there anything else you want to say before we head out?
I guess I have a book to promote.
Yes.
Get my book, The Morning Always Comes.
Yes, please read the book.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming. And for the podcast, you can find us, same name, Hello the Podcast, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all the things. So So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for being here.